All right. Thank you for joining me on my Wednesday live Q&A. Hopefully you're here live with me. If you're not, then you're listening to this at some point in the future on a replay on my podcast, and that's fine too. You can find that replay at Just Start Real Estate in iTunes or Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. That's where I'm at. If you ever miss one of these, that's where you can go and hear the replay of it. But when you're live, you can ask questions live, and that's always fun because we can have some back and forth and some exchange. But like I said, you can go out to Just Start Real Estate in iTunes. I put it up here on the screen for you so you can see that. And you can listen. You can submit questions, by the way, via email or DM. If you can find me on social media, most of my social media, you can find me at Mike S. Simmons, middle initial S, last name Simmons, on Instagram or Twitter, wherever you want to find me. You can find me there and ask questions, and we'll get them on the show. If you are in a position right now where you're struggling a little bit with leads and you're trying to find more leads and get more leads in your business, I can help with that. If you go to my website, mikesimmons.com, I have created a program for you. It's free, and you can go and check that out. It's called Winning Direct Mail. It's right on the front page. You can just put in your information. Boom, I send you the course, and it's a 5-part video series on direct mail, and it's how I've gotten probably the first 5-6 years that I was doing wholesaling from like 2015 through 2021. It was far and away got me more deals than anything else. It was really, it's effective. It works. And most people that I know that are doing real estate, because I literally took this kind of an informal poll of all of my friends and people that I know that are really crushing it in real estate. Ask them how they're getting the majority of their leads, and pretty much everybody said direct mail. So it's legitimate. It works. It's working still. If you thought that you tried it years ago and it didn't work for you, and you're wondering if people are still doing it, they are. And so go check it out on my website. It's called Winning Direct Mail. You can put your information right on the front page there, and I will get that course to you for free. Okay, let's dive into the questions for today and see what we got. I didn't pre-read these. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. So let's dive in and see what we got. Okay. First question. Let me get it up on the screen here. Hey, Doug, how's it going, man? Before we do that first question, let me just check and see if Doug has a question. Let's see. Doug says, "Hey, Mike, sorry for all the questions lately. Do not apologize. That's why I'm on here. I prefer when people log on and ask questions. That's my preference. So I love it. Let's see, Doug, I am a flipper learning how to wholesale. I've heard about wholesaling properties currently listed on the MLS. How does that work? My company does not wholesale anything that's listed on the MLS. It's just it's super difficult. Honestly, it's really more of a pain in the butt than anything. I would highly suggest that you, if you're talking to the sellers and they want to wholesale it, infinitely easier to get it off the MLS first. End their contract, because the problem is you're going to have to pay their realtor, and they're going to have to be involved in the transaction. And when that realtor is talking to other realtors, like, it's just a very difficult and a very difficult conversation for them to have, and a difficult scenario to navigate, because you're relying on realtors to sort of understand what's going on. We've tried it years ago, and it was such a colossal pain in the butt to do that we just said, no more. We're not doing that. It can blow up in your face in so many ways. So if you have a seller who wants, and this happens though all the time, we have a seller sometimes who will say to us, my house isn't selling. I just want to get rid of it. I'll take your cash offer. And we say, great. You need to end the contract with your realtor. And we usually don't make the offer until that relationship has been extinguished. But we tell them, get rid of the MLS, right? Get it off the MLS. And if you're out of contract with your realtor, just tell them thanks, but no thanks. And we'll come in and make you an offer, and we'll handle it that way. If that realtor is the one who brought us the seller, then they'll get compensated. Like we tell the seller, hey, listen, they found us and they brought us, you have to compensate them. And so I'm not trying to avoid the realtor's commissions. I'm trying to avoid the realtor's involvement, if that makes sense. And so you're a flipper learning how to wholesale. I would not suggest wholesaling things off of the MLS. Now, if you can buy them off the MLS and think you can turn them around and resell them to flippers and landlords, that's fine. But that doesn't really work either, unless they just didn't see it on the MLS. But I don't know, man. The MLS and wholesaling only works on the back end, in my opinion. It doesn't work really well. It's really not. I would not. I just don't want you to do it, Doug. I know you, and I just don't want you to do it on the front end. Don't do it to purchase properties, but to sell properties, that's a totally different thing. My company all the time puts properties on the MLS and wholesales them on the MLS. We just don't buy off the MLS wholesale, if that makes sense. So I don't like it. I say if you're learning how to wholesale and you're trying to get into it, this is far and away the worst way to start is to try to wholesale things by purchasing them on the MLS and then wholesaling them. It's a mess. It's a real mess. So I wouldn't do it. All right. If you have a follow-up question, Doug, by all means, we can continue that conversation. But I hate the idea of buying off the MLS for wholesale purposes. Love the idea of selling on the MLS for wholesale purposes. Okay. I will pop up the next question, and Doug, you feel free to ask a follow-up. Okay, next question. Would love guidance on buying out-of-state investment properties, from techniques for research on best markets, to is it okay to purchase sight unseen, or would you always recommend viewing in person, etc.? So when you're looking for out-of-market properties, one of the main, I shouldn't say the number one thing, but one of the main things that you want to look at is time on market. You want to, if you're going to go out of your own market, I'm assuming you're doing it for one of two reasons, or maybe both. Either house prices are just way too crazy high and it just doesn't make any sense, or it just takes forever. Nothing's moving, right? It's kind of stagnant. So you want to do research on days on market, and you can do that. Like, you can ask realtors. You can call realtors in those market and just ask them days on market. There's tools online, but one thing I definitely would do is go on to listsource.com. It's where we go. Mostly we go as investors to find houses that we could potentially buy. So we pull lists like equity lists and foreclosure lists and things like that. But you can also go on there to kind of see how many houses are actually selling in that market. And so you can look up the market population or the number of households in that market and then see how many houses are selling and kind of triangulate that a little bit. It's this could take an hour in and of itself just to talk about finding them, but really you just want to make sure that you're going into a market that has action or heat. You know what I mean? Like, there's houses are moving. It's not just sitting stagnant, for sure. As far as buying houses sight unseen to me means you didn't even see pictures of it, and so I wouldn't advise doing that. But I don't think you have to see them in person. Like, during COVID, my company continued to buy and sell houses. They were all local, but during COVID, we couldn't go to people's houses, right? There was a lot of apprehension about people allowing people in your house and that kind of thing. So we were really doing virtual wholesaling, but we were just doing it in our market. We weren't going to the houses at all. We weren't meeting people face to face. We were doing everything over Zoom and DocuSign and stuff like that. So I think doing it remotely is not a big deal at all, and not going into the house physically is not necessarily a problem. But you definitely want pictures, maybe a video walkthrough, maybe even send somebody to the house to do a video walkthrough and take pictures, so you make sure you're getting really accurate pictures. But I wouldn't have a problem with you not physically going to the house. Just make sure that you're getting pictures from somebody who maybe is a little bit impartial, not necessarily the seller. Although a lot of people have the sellers just take pictures, and that's fine. But sellers sometimes will avoid the really ugly parts of the house, and that's just going to cause you problems when buyers go to look at it. So I would say sending a third party, a realtor or somebody in that market through the house to take pictures is probably a really good idea. But I don't think you have to be there physically yourself at all. So I wouldn't do that. I would also use somebody local in that market to pull comps. I know you can pull them from PropStream and, Zillow and Redfin and all these places. I really don't 100% trust any of those services. And also in the market that we're in, it's kind of volatile. So I would want to talk to an experienced realtor in that market to get ARV, because you can build all your numbers out, but it all starts with ARV. And so if your ARV is wrong, your whole calculation is going to be wrong. And so you have to start with good numbers. And I would use a realtor in that market to start with good numbers. That's the way I would do it. All right, let's move right along. All right, next question. I'm looking for educational resources for creating systems in your business, no matter what size, to scale long term. Thoughts? Yeah. If you're looking for educational resources, I mean, there's free ones out there, obviously. I mean, my podcast, this Q&A, things like that. It's tough to dial in and get real specific answers to your specific situation. There's websites, Bigger Pockets and things, obviously, but that ends up being a lot of work trying to mine for gold in all those resources and forums and chats and all this stuff. I really think I truly believe when you're trying to do anything at a high level, especially when you're trying to build a business that has the potential to make hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, it just doesn't make sense to try to figure it out on your own. And it really doesn't even make sense to just use completely and solely depend on free resources, because although the information could be good, it's hard, it's not curated, right? It's not what you need when you need it. I really think that coaching and masterminds and things like that are the way to go. Um, as you guys know, I've talked about it a million times on the show. I am a partner in the Seven Figure Flipping Mastermind, and there's a few avenues you can go inside of Seven Figure. You can join what's called the Runway program. The Runway program is designed for newer investors, people who have done a deal or two, or maybe they do a deal a month, or not a lot, right? The Runway program is very foundational. It helps you set up systems and processes, things like that. The next level up is called Altitude, and that's for people who are, have done at least, 10, 12 deals. They're already making six figures, and they want to really dial in their systems and processes and really start building out that business system so that they're creating income, and there's houses coming in and out of that machine every month without you having to do everything. That would be more the Altitude program. I also have some stuff that I do more one-on-one with people. If you're interested in that, you can go to my website, mikesimmons.com, and check it out. But I definitely think you need coaching, mentoring, mastermind. I just think those are so valuable. I know for me what it did. I'm not just saying it in theory. I've lived it. I was really struggling for about 5 or 6 years in my business, not gaining any traction, not knowing what to do, not having really great systems and processes. And I got help. I joined a mastermind. I joined Seven Figure, and my business exploded. And so you can take that same route. It's an investment for sure. And Seven Figure Flipping Runway program, the more beginner level program, only opens its doors, I think, once a quarter. And so if you're looking for something sooner than that, like I said, go to my website and check it out. Otherwise, you can always reach out to me and ask me about Seven Figure or what I have going on. All that is available to you. I'm more than happy to help direct you where it's most appropriate for where you are in your business. But I highly suggest you get help, because even though masterminds and coaches and things like that cost money, the money that it saves you in mistakes and lost time and lost opportunity is the money you're spending is small compared to the money that you're saving and the opportunities that you're not missing because you went and got help. It's just I can't emphasize enough how important I think it is. And so that's what I would do if I were you. Okay, let me get that off the screen and come back here. Cool. Mike Smith. Hey man, how you doing? All right. I'm going to pop this up on the screen here. Hey Mike, I'm doing your direct mail course now. It's awesome. Thank you. Anytime an experienced expert shares their experience, there is much to be gleaned. I agree, Mike. I really do. In this case, you're talking about my direct mail course, which I mentioned at the beginning of this Q&A. I agree. All that stuff that I'm doing in there, a lot of it, most of it, I learned myself from somebody else, and then I applied it in my business. Spent tons and tons of money perfecting it. And then now I'm kind of paying that back and doing that for everybody else. So I think just learning from somebody else, and the direct mail course is free, but in general, if you're spending money to learn how to accelerate your business, you're paying for speed. You're paying to not take 5 or 6 years like it took me to figure things out. You're paying to learn it faster. I did a calculation about 6 months ago of how much money I estimate I lost by not getting help sooner and sort of floundering for 5 or 6 years. And it was over $3 million that I lost by trying to figure it out on my own and not necessarily doing a great job of that. So I'm no mentor or mastermind is going to cost you $3 million, but it will cost you $3 million potentially. It cost me $3 million to not do it. So I think doing that is important. Okay, Mike goes on to say, any tips for flipping properties now besides assuming a lower ARV 4 to 6 months down the road? Can I assume there's always a market for median priced homes, nicely finished nicely at a reasonable price? Yes, Mike, there is. I was just had a conversation late last week, with a friend of mine in my market. He's one of my buyers. He's a house flipper. He does a little bit of wholesaling. He does some rentals. He does some short-term stuff. I mean, he's in the game. It's all he does. He's not doing it on the side. He's doing it. He's a professional. He's doing it for his livelihood. And he has a team of people that he is paying them, and that's their livelihood. And I was asking him about the market and what he's doing in this market. Is he kind of getting conservative? Is he still making offers? Is he trying to play it a little bit safe and slow down operations to kind of feel out what's happening? And he's like, I mean, I wish you guys could have heard the conversation. He got really excited. He said, "No, actually, I reviewed my goals for the coming year and I decided to increase all of them. I'm going to do way more. My goal is to do way more next year than I originally planned because the opportunities are tremendous in the market that we're in and the market that we're moving into." So there will always be a market for like median priced or middle of the market, however you want to say it. There's always going to be a market for that because you have to remember, we are, as investors, when we go direct to seller, for example, we're typically buying from people who are in some sort of distress, maybe personal distress, maybe their house is in distress, right? Maybe they're not in so much distress, but for example, you have maybe a widow, her husband just passed away, she's in her 70s, she's not in any sort of immediate need to move, but the house is in really bad shape. The roof maybe needs to be replaced. Just a lot of deferred maintenance in the house. And so she's not necessarily in distress, but the fact that she can't maintain a house that has a lot of deferred maintenance means the house is in distress, which means she wants to move. It's too much. It's too big. She can't afford to maintain. She doesn't need all of this. Like, she wants out, right? That has nothing to do with the economy. It has nothing to do with interest rates. It has nothing to do with house prices. She just needs out because she needs out. And she would have needed out 2 years ago when the market was hot. She would need out 3 years from now or right now. It doesn't matter. It's circumstances. So people sell to us and people buy because of circumstances. Some people buy because of the market, granted, right? Some people will sell because of the market. I'm an example of someone who sold because of the market. The market was hot, and so I sold because we were at the top of the market, right? I was going to sell eventually, but it prompted me because of the market. But most people, death, divorce, loss of job, job transfer, deferred maintenance, back taxes, all these things cause people to sell their house, and those happen in all markets. And so the really good house flippers and landlords and wholesalers, they don't start and stop based on interest rates and market and economy. They continue to go. They just alter their approach a little bit. They change the way they talk to sellers. They change the way they talk to buyers. And that allows them to compete and be competitive in every market. I know investors, I've been in this since 2008, right? So I went through 2008. I went through the gradual buildup. I went through the sky high prices that we just got out of. And now it's kind of going back down. I've been through that, but I know people who have been in it twice as long as me. They've seen many ups and downs. They've seen good economies, bad economies, high interest, low interest, all of it. And they've been successful through the whole thing. The people who think they watch, this isn't like day trading. You're not watching the market and getting in and out and trying to time stuff necessarily. You can do a little bit of that, but the goal is you don't ever want to stop buying and selling. You just want to make sure you're buying and selling smartly, appropriately for the market. But it worries me, and it a little bit frustrates me when people tell me that they're looking at the market and they're sort of going to stop buying for a while. It's like, okay, that's fine. Most of those people have a 9 to 5, and that's totally fine too. But if you want to build a sustainable real estate company, if you do this full time for sure, you need to learn how to survive in every market. Every market, good, bad, winter, summer, spring, fall, doesn't matter. High interest, low interest, Democratic president, Republican president, doesn't matter. You have to learn how to survive in all of them. And if you don't know how to survive in all of them and you feel like you're failing because of the market, get help. Find a mentor, find a coach, get help now because it works in every single market. I promise you that. Okay. Let's see. Next one here, Zach. Hey, Zach, how's it going, man? Zach says, can you give us a rundown of how wholesale works from start to finish? Yes, I have done this on this show before, but I'll give you the 10,000 foot view. Let's see. And then Zach also said, I'm going to throw this up here too. What happens if you can't sell a contract? And what is the best way to find buyers? Okay, so we'll start the wholesale process from start to finish. So it all starts with some sort of lead generation strategy or marketing, whatever you want to call it. And there's a lot of ways that you can find leads. There's direct mail, which I'm a huge fan of. And as mentioned earlier by Mike, I have a course out there. If you want to use it, you can. It's free. There is something called PPC. It's pay per click, Google Ads. Somebody types in "sell my house fast" in Michigan, and my ad comes up on top because I pay to be on top of that. So it's called Google AdWords. There's a lot of other ways. There's cold calling. You can get a list, download a list, and cold call potential sellers to see if they want to sell their house. You can do text blast. You can do driving for dollars, right? So it all starts with some sort of lead generation strategy that drives leads into your business. Okay. You drive those leads in your business and they're received by you, whether it's a phone call, a form fill on your website, whatever it is, a lead comes in, you reach out to that seller or you pick up the phone when they call you and you start having a conversation. And that conversation, the main goal of that conversation is to determine motivation. Why do they need to sell? Why do they want to sell? What's going on in their life? And do they truly need to sell or are they just kicking tires, right? You have this conversation, you identify people with true motivation. They need to sell their house. You make them an offer on the house and they accept it, right? Usually there's some negotiation back and forth. Not everyone sells you their house, right? But on some level, you're communicating with people who showed some interest in you buying their house. You make them an offer to buy their house, they agree, you sign a purchase agreement. Okay. So now we have a purchase agreement between you as the wholesaler and the seller, purchase agreement. Now we take the information about that house and we put it out to what we call our buyers list, right? It's a private email list of buyers that have identified themselves and said, I am an investor, I'm a flipper, I'm a landlord, I want to buy discounted properties. And so we take that purchase agreement, we put the information in an email, and we send it out to our buyers list. We identify a buyer or multiple buyers who are interested in that house. We negotiate a price with them. Now, the purchase agreement that we have with the seller, for the sake of this demonstration or this conversation, we're going to say we got under contract for $100,000. The seller agreed to sell us their house for $100,000. Now we put that information out to our buyers. We don't tell them that we have it under contract for 100,000. We just tell them we have this opportunity for them to buy this house and whatever the price you want to mark it up. For the sake of argument, I'm going to say we're putting it out to our buyers at a price of 120,000. And we find a buyer who says, "I will buy that house for 120,000." Now I have a purchase agreement with the seller, me, and I have a buyer who's willing to pay $20,000 more than I have it under contract for. Then we create between me and the buyer, we create what's called an assignment contract. An assignment contract basically assigns my rights to this original purchase agreement. It assigns it to the buyer for a fee, right? So that assignment contract will basically tell them they're going to get the rights to this house for $20,000, and we sign that with the buyer. The assignment contract and the purchase agreement go to the title company. Title company totally knows what's happening here, right? And so they look at that, and then we all go to closing. The seller gets $100,000. The buyer wires in 120,000. So the seller gets their 100. I get the difference. That $20,000. They wired in a 120. Seller gets his 100. I get the 20, and we all go home. I never bought the house. I never had to raise money for the house. I simply find a seller who's willing to sell and a buyer who's willing to buy for more than I have it under contract to buy, right? On the purchase agreement. We create an assignment contract. Both those contracts go to title. Everyone goes to the closing and we get paid. That's a high level overview of what wholesaling is. There's different ways to do it, but that is the traditional sort of straightforward way. Okay. So your next question was, what happens if you can't sell a contract? When we get properties under contract, 9 times out of 10, we are negotiating a due diligence period with that house. And so we'll tell the seller, because usually we'll go in with a price that we want to pay, and the seller has a higher price that they want. And so in this case, let's just say my maximum offer that I wanted to make on that house when I went to go see it was 95,000. But I get there and they tell me they'll never go below 100. Maybe they owe 100, who knows, right? And so they can't go below 100. And so I say, Mr. Mrs. Seller, I came here authorized to spend 95, but you can't go lower than 100. Let's do this. Let's sign the contract for 100, okay? And it's a little more than I wanted to spend, and so I need to go and do a little bit of homework on my end. I need to go look again at the market. I need to really dial this in. I need to talk to my lenders and my investors and my partners and people that I work with, and let them know that this could still make sense for us at 100. So all I'm asking is that you give me a week or two, maybe 10 days, right? Whatever we want to negotiate, 10 days to do my due diligence and see if I can make this deal work at 100. I think that I can, but let me see. And when I come back in 10 days or less, if I find out sooner that I can do it, I'll tell you. But I'll come back within 10 days and I'll tell you one of two things. I'll say either yes, we are ready to go, we can close at 100, or I'm going to tell you I can't do 100. I tried, but I'm 95 is the number that I have to stick at. And you could just say, all right, well, let's just cancel the contract at that point, or you can lower your price, whatever you want to do. But I'm going to come back and just give you an honest answer. And so that's what we do. If we can't sell it, that's that due diligence, by the way, that 10 days, that's when we go out to our private buyers list and see if we have a buyer at that price. And if we don't, we go back and say, hey, we can't close at that price. I told you I was going to do 10 days due diligence, and I'm just coming back and letting you know I can't do it. So if you set it up properly, if the expectations are set up front properly, sellers don't generally have a problem. It's when you tell them, oh, great, 100,000, no problem. Let's sign the contract. And then I don't call them for a week. And then I come back in a week and say, I can't do it. I can't buy it for that price. Now they're really mad. The same thing happened, but in one case they're like, okay, no problem. And in the other case, they're really mad. It's because expectations. In the first scenario, I set their expectations that I was going to come back and give them an answer. And one of those possible answers was, I can't close at 100. In the second scenario, I just said, great, I signed the contract and never said a word about whether or not I could do it. And so expectations are everything. So that's what we do is, as far as like, if we can't sell a contract, we prepare them for the conversation in a week or two that we can't do it at that price. But we always try to honor it. It's not a game for us. We don't sign contracts and then come back and say, yeah, we can't do it, and see if they'll lower it. If we can buy it at that price and we find a buyer who's willing to pay a price that makes it make sense for us, then we close at that price. Many times we end up closing at the price that we did our due diligence on. Sometimes we don't. And we always set them up properly. All right. Next question. Best way to find buyers. the best way to find buyers is to go to your local meetups, your local RIAs, shake hands, find out who the investors are, find out who the house flippers are, find out who the landlords are, and get to know them and shake hands and tell them who you are and what you do and have those real relationships. Those are always great. Another way to do it is if you use list source, like I mentioned earlier, you can go on list source and pull a list of people who bought properties. And the criteria that you want to pull is somebody who bought a property for cash. They didn't use a mortgage. They don't live there, so it's not owner occupied, and they bought it inside of an LLC. Okay. Homeowners who are living in a house do not buy cash. They certainly do live there, and they usually don't buy it inside of an LLC. So if you find someone who bought it for cash, doesn't live there, bought it with an LLC, that's an investor. And so we pull that list and we send them letters and say, hey, we buy houses all the time, off market, way undervalue. I can't always, take advantage of the situation, or I can't always do anything with the houses that I find. And so I find investors who would like to come in and buy those properties. I see that you're an investor. I would love to make you aware of what I have when I have it. And if you want to give me a call, I can put you on my list, or you can go to this website. We kind of send them a letter that's setting them up to let them know we have off-market opportunities, and we give them a way to get on our list so they can see those. So that's how we find, those are the two major ways we find buyers. Okay. Next question. Corey Lawson, my man, Corey. Let's see. Corey, between the market gap, the increased rates, and the less active holiday season we are approaching, it seems to be tough going for wholesalers out there. Any advice to navigate the next 8 weeks? Yeah, I've actually tried everything you can think of, because our business slows down a little bit too, especially during the month of December. We have tried not mailing or not doing any marketing during December. We've tried limiting the marketing we're doing. We've tried everything. At the end of the day, and after a lot of trial and error, after a lot of years, we eventually realized that we need to continue to market through the holiday season. We don't slow down. We don't stop. We just keep going, because when you stop during the holiday season, when the holiday season is over, it takes a while for your marketing to get out, to catch hold, for people to get it in their hands. And so we ended up having bad January and Februarys when we stopped marketing in November, December. And so we just keep going all the way through. We just keep going. I mean, that's the best advice I can give you. The more and more I'm in this industry, and the more that my business has grown and kind of matured, we realized that starting and stopping, trying to time things, the interest rates go up, we react to it, or house prices go down or go up, we stop buying, we buy more. You have to just keep going. You can't totally like start and stop your business every time a condition changes. So I personally, man, Corey, we're still going full steam ahead. We just are. That's always worked out the best for us. The difference is it's not the marketing that you do. It's not like slowing down or any of that. It's the conversations you have. You need to start talking to sellers with the reality of their situation being made apparent to them. The market is going down. Their house is worth less than it was a year ago. And 6 months from now, it's going to be worth less, probably. Interest rates are going up, which effectively means they're going to get less for their house, because as interest rates go up, people's buying power goes down. And so that affects house prices. If you live in a cold weather state, which I think, Corey, you have moved to, or you're moving to, we utilize that to our advantage in this time of the year. We say, listen, especially if it's a non-owner occupied house, you have winter months coming, you've got snow, you've got ice, you've got frozen pipes, you've got all kinds of bad things that can happen to a house that's not occupied. You're way better off to get that thing sold while it's not snowing and while it's not cold, because not only do you have frozen pipe and snow and ice and slip and fall and all that stuff, you've got the heating the house, all these holding costs that kind of kill you in the winter months are there. So anyways, the conversations we have to change a little bit, and we have to put a sense of urgency and reality into our message to sellers. And that's really the things that we modify in these markets. We don't modify our volume or our goals at all. Okay. Let's see. Next question, Zach. Zach says, can you give us an example of how a contract signing would go if you're in person? I'm not sure if I understand the question, Zach. So when you go to talk to a seller in person, let me read this again, make sure I got it. Can you give us an example of how a contract signing would go if you were in person? It's pretty straightforward. If we go to a house in person to buy a house and we agree upon a price, we bring a contract. Like, that's something I actually get surprised every once in a while by people that I talk to. A few weeks back, I talked to someone who said, when I go to a seller appointment, should I bring a purchase agreement? And I was like dumbfounded. I was like, what do you mean? Should you bring of course you have to bring a purchase agreement. Like, you should be trying to get the contract. You should try to get that purchase agreement in the first appointment, always. So it starts with bringing a contract. But I'm not, the question is confusing for me, Zach. Maybe I'm missing your point, but you just sign it. Like, you bring a purchase agreement and get a signature in that first appointment. So I don't know what part of how that goes that you're questioning. So if you want to clarify, I'll be happy to answer. I'm just not sure if I'm getting it. Okay. Mike Smith, should I avoid higher end but not outrageously priced properties to flip and stick to median prices, or still buy higher end, just be more conservative on ARV and sale price? Well, definitely be conservative. When you go to the higher end houses, the challenge and the risk always, even in a good market, doesn't matter. The challenge is always that the buyer pool is smaller because it's a higher end house. And so if you have, 1 million buyers in your market, it's a lot, whatever, 1,000,000, doesn't matter. But let's just say 1 million. You have 1 million buyers in your market. The buyers who are buying in the median house prices is probably going to represent 750,000 of those million. The rest of the 250 is going to be people who want to buy lower end or can only buy lower end, cheaper houses. And then some portion of that, maybe 100,000, 150,000, are going to be buying higher end. And so even in a good market, meaning good high prices, right? An appreciating market, you always have a smaller buyer pool. So there's a risk there. I have never been a fan of putting a lot of my money, marketing money and energy, into higher end houses. Now, if you have done that traditionally, Mike, and you're like, I buy higher end houses, that's what I've always done, I don't think there's any reason to not do that. Because I just bought a house in my market that would be considered higher end about a year ago. House prices were at an all-time high. And that's when I bought my house, because that's just when I needed to do it. It's just my circumstances. Like I said, I sold my house when the market was at the top. So I needed to buy. If it was, 6 months from now, like, maybe that's when somebody needs to buy. So there's always going to be people buying and selling houses, guys. There just is. But in a market where the house prices are going down and interest rates are going up, there's that high-end buyer's market, the pool could be even smaller, a little bit smaller. And so you may hold things a little bit longer, and then hold times and the holding costs kind of kill you. I'm a huge fan of spending most of your time, energy, and money in the median market, because there's just so many more people. And it only takes one to buy or to sell. It only takes one. But there's just so many, the percentage chance of success is so much higher in the middle. And so in this gap period that we're in right now, in this market fluctuation kind of volatile spot that we're in, my blanket advice, without having, maybe an hour to sit down and talk to you, Mike, about your operation, your access to money, your experience, all of these things, your market, days on market in your market, like, there would be a lot of conversation I'd want to have with you to dial in a really, really good answer. But with what I know so far, what you've told me, and just what I know in general, my blanket advice to the general population of real estate investors is, for sure, stick in that median market range. That is your best chance of success and probably your safest zone to be in. So yes, I would definitely definitely stick to the more median priced homes if I were you. Okay, back to Doug. Doug, love it. On my first wholesale, the buyer wanted a copy of the contract with the seller. Is that normal? Yes, it is normal. But I try to never give out that contract until I have an executed assignment contract with them. Now, technically, you are asking them to pay you to have controlling rights of the purchase agreement, the original purchase agreement. If you look at it logically and realistically, how can someone in good conscience agree to pay you for control of a document they've never seen, right? A really experienced house flipper, landlord, somebody who does this a lot and it's sort of routine for them, probably won't force you to show them the contract before they sign the assignment contract. And honestly, if I'm not asked specifically and directly for the purchase agreement, a copy of it, I never give it to the buyer if they don't ask for it. If they ask for it, I make sure that they sign a assignment contract first. I'll tell them the terms. I just don't necessarily want them to see my purchase price and the seller's contact information. Because if I tell you, okay, Doug, if we're doing a transaction and I say, hey, I've got this house on 123 Elm Street. Here are the pictures. Here's all the information. Go and look at it. You go and look at it. And I say, you could have this house for $200,000. That would be your purchase price. And you run your numbers and you determine that $200,000 is a great deal for you. And then you see my purchase agreement with the seller, and my purchase agreement is for $195,000 and you're buying it for $200,000. You feel pretty good. All right, this wholesaler is going to make $5,000, but I love the deal. I'm excited about it. You're happy. No problems, right? Now, same scenario. I show you the pictures. You get to see the house. I tell you everything about it, and I say you can have it for $200,000, right? Just like the first scenario. You can have it for $200,000. And you run your numbers and look at it and you determine $200,000 is a great price for this house. I'm excited about it. And then you see the purchase agreement and you see that I have it under contract for $50,000. How do you feel now? Right? What if you saw that contract for $50,000 before you agreed to $200,000? Are you going to negotiate a little harder with me knowing that I'm going to make $150,000? You probably are, right? So I don't show contracts. I don't show the purchase agreement. They don't get access to it until they sign the assignment contract and give me their deposit. That's typically how it works. And if they don't ask, I don't give it to them. So that's how I deal with that, man. But yeah, it is sort of normal. Like you can't necessarily blame someone for wanting to see the contract that they're essentially buying from you, right? So you have to, it's a little bit, you got to navigate those waters a little bit. All right, boy, we got a lot of questions. This is good, but we are running over here. Let me try to see if I can do a fire round a little bit, like a speed round. Okay, Mike Smith. I wholesale, but never want to be known as someone who doesn't keep his word. As long as I'm telling the seller I'm trying to find a buyer for their home and won't be purchasing it myself, is that the ethical way to do it? That is an ethical way to do it. I think it's the not advisable way to do it. And it's not because you're being honest. That's not at all the reason why I don't advise it. What I suggest, if you tell someone that you are going to wholesale their house, or you say, hey, I'm going to sign a purchase agreement with you, but then I got to go find someone to actually buy it because I'm not buying it. You're being honest, but you're also introducing an awful lot of confusion into the scenario. What we typically do is we sign the purchase agreement with them. And if we need to do due diligence, like I said earlier, we'll say, hey, we need to go and do, a week of due diligence. And we're going to go talk to our investors. We're going to go talk to our partners. We're going to go talk to investors that we're going to be working with. And we need to see if this makes sense for them at this price. And then we'll come back. And if we can't do it, we'll let you know. But the ethical part of it is not necessarily telling them how the sausage is made, right? Most people, If you take them to a slaughterhouse, they're not eating hamburgers anymore. And it's not because they don't love hamburgers or hamburgers are bad, but if you show them how the cows are slaughtered and, a stake driven through their head and all that stuff, right? No one's eating a hamburger, most people. We don't necessarily tell them how the sausage is made or how the hamburger is made. We just make sure that we never tell them the house sale is a done deal unless it is a done deal and we're willing to buy it ourselves if we can't find a buyer. We always set expectations. We never use the language to the sellers. We have to find a buyer, because to the sellers, you're the buyer, right? That's the implied agreement that you have. And so you're the buyer to them. The minute you start clouding that in their brain, you will almost certainly not sign many contracts. As long as they get what you tell them they're going to get, or the process goes the way that you're telling them it's going to go, as long as you keep that part of your promise, that's the ethics of it. What's unethical is to say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, yes, I'm going to buy your house. Go ahead, get the U-Haul, get everything out of here, put a down payment on your next house, move out of state, like do all these things because I'm buying your house. And then you come back to them in 2-3 weeks and say, yeah, I can't buy your house. That's unethical. But if you say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I know you want to get a U-Haul and you want to put a down payment, I need 10 days before you do that. I need 10 days to do my own due diligence. I need to talk to my investors and talk to my partners and talk to the investor partners that I'm going to be working with. I need to find out if I can actually execute on this contract as is, because it's higher. The price is higher than what I wanted to spend. But if you give me 10 days, I'll come back and I'll tell you either A, I cannot move forward at this price, or B, I can move forward at this price and we're good to go. Can you just give me 10 days before you do anything? Yes, great. That's ethical. That's ethical. I've made this joke a million times, but it bears being repeated. I have told my parents what I do. They know what I do, right? But if I ask them to explain exactly back to me what wholesaling is and how I conduct my business, they probably couldn't do it. Even though they're proud of me, they love me. My mom watches this Q&A, like she hears all this stuff, but unless you're in it, it's hard to understand wholesaling. And for the seller who's usually in some sort of personal distress, or the house is in something's going on in their life that makes them want to sell to us, it's going to confuse the ever-loving crap out of them, and you're probably not going to sign many contracts. So it's not unethical to not tell them how the sausage is made. Just make sure they get the sausage they ordered. Okay, to use that weird analogy. Okay, that wasn't exactly a speed round answer, but it was an important one. All right, Zach, do you tell the seller that you're buying it, or how are you wording it? Oh, I just kind of said it a couple times there. We really don't get into that a lot, because the implication is that we're buying it. But as long as they get what we told them they're going to get, that's the important thing. But if we do frame it like we want due diligence period, we say investors, we say partners, that's the kind of language we use, right? We may sometimes say we work with a lot of investors who are going to bring the money to the table for this deal, and we need to talk to them, right? And that is true. That's not a false statement. We are working with investors who are going to be the ones bringing the money to the table, right? But we don't call them buyers, because that's just infinitely confusing to use the word buyer to someone who's looking at you as the buyer, right? It's not a great way to phrase it. It's too confusing. Okay, Mike Smith, how do you handle leads in areas you have no interest in, or it may be a property that is too weird? Do you offer any way, or in a market like this, do you just say list with the realtor? I know. No, we buy houses. Okay, let me rephrase it. We sign contracts for houses as a wholesaler that we would never want ourselves, because like you said, they're in an area that I don't like, or they're weird layout. But what I found is, as a wholesaler, you're not buying houses you like. You're buying houses that you have buyers for. So I buy houses in areas all the time that I wouldn't buy them, but I know we have buyers in that area. Or I think the layout's weird, but we still get under contract and market it out to our buyers. We always set expectations with the seller if we're not 100% convinced that we're going to find a buyer, or if we're not willing to buy it ourselves. And by the way, a lot of the deals that we sign with sellers, we will buy them ourselves and then figure out a way to flip it or make it a rental or something if we don't find a buyer. But if we have a house where we just don't want it at all, we'll set expectations with the sellers, but we'll still get the contract, because I am constantly amazed and constantly surprised by what buyers want and what they're willing to buy and what they're interested in. So we don't start second guessing and only buying things that we personally like, because just because I don't like it, it doesn't mean our buyers won't like it. I've seen it hundreds of times. Buyers buy houses that I just wouldn't want, but they do, right? And so we sign contracts all the time for houses that we don't love, but I don't have to love it because I got buyers that love it. I have hedge funds on my buyers list, hedge funds that buy in neighborhoods that locals will not buy. I won't buy it. My buyers don't want it, but I have hedge funds on my buyers list who will buy it, and they'll buy it all day long. So we sign those contracts all the time, knowing we have a buyer who's interested in that neighborhood, even though we aren't and our rest of our buyers aren't. They are. So we do it all the time, man. You can't. It's just like a house flipper who paints a house the way they want it, or they buy a house in a B neighborhood or a C neighborhood and they use A finishes, A cabinets, and like high end stuff in a middle of the road house, because that's what they would want. If they were going to move in that house, they would want those finishes. But that's not how you do it as an investor. You have to finish it in a way that the buyers will be interested and buy it, where you can maximize profit. And so in a mid-level house, you put mid-level cabinets. In a high-end house, you put high-end cabinets. Doesn't matter what you want. It matters what your buyers want. So we do the same thing as a wholesaler. We care what our buyers want. Okay. Thanks for your time, Mike. You're very appreciated. Thanks, man. Thanks, Zach. I appreciate that. All right. Replying to Doug Lovett. I see contracts all the time. They usually just black out the price and other. Yeah, you can do that too. Sure, you can do that too if they just want to see the wording of your contract. We have also sent blank contracts to our buyers so they at least can just see the language, and we maybe don't want to show them the house, the seller's contact information and the purchase price. We sometimes will send them a blank contract to say, here, this is the contract that they signed. This isn't the one they signed, but it's the same contract. If you just want to see the language, go ahead. But a lot of our buyers are repeat buyers too. So they've seen our contracts a million times. They don't need to see it. So that's another part of just having a more mature business, I guess. All right, Zach, what system do you use to find your ARV? So again, I don't have time to get into the whole thing, but we use the MLS. That's the important thing. We use the MLS. We don't use any third-party service or anything like that. We go straight to the MLS. And I'll put this down as a question for another night. I can go through in more detail how I do that, but we're using the MLS because it's just more reliable. Okay, Mike Smith, thank you so much, Mike. Amazing info once again. Awesome, guys. Very much appreciated. I love all the questions, all the live interaction. Like, I stop this thing usually after 30 minutes. Like I'm done and I cut it off. We're almost an hour in because I thoroughly enjoy having this live conversation with you guys. So everybody that was on here live, Doug, Mike Smith, Zach, Corey, I think that was everybody. I love it, guys. You're awesome. And Corey, you are very welcome, sir. And happy early Thanksgiving to you as well. I'll see you guys next week. And like I said, thanks for logging on live. This is so much more fun for me to have a live interaction with you than answering questions that people sent in. So thanks again, guys. I appreciate you all, and keep the questions coming. I love it. And we can talk about, I can break down the ARV, the determining ARV, that process if you guys are interested. I can do that another week. So thanks for being here, guys, and we'll